Hey there and welcome to Concierge Medicine Radio, your source for actionable advice and real stories of physicians running and growing concierge practices. For more interviews and notes on today's show, please visit conciergemedicineradio.com and enter your email. Now, let's join your host, Taylor Pearson.
Hey there and welcome to Concierge Medicine Radio. I'm excited to be back with you and bring you episode 24 with Dr. Marty Schulman. Dr. Schulman is based out of San Diego, California, and I talk with him today a little bit about building his micro concierge practice. So Dr. Schulman has been running a micro concierge practice for the last 10 years that's let him serve his patients in a way he finds most fulfilling. So we talk a little bit about how Dr. Schulman supplements his income to let him run the type of clinic he loves to run, why he wishes he kept his overhead lower when he started and how he would have done that, the difference that makes Dr. Schulman's practice referable to his patients, and the resources Dr. Schulman used to start up his practice and the best resources he would recommend for anyone interested in starting up their concierge practice today. I also want to take the time to thank all of you that have left us a review on iTunes. It does make a difference, and we do appreciate it. So if you enjoy the show, please do hop into iTunes and leave us a review as it helps us get the word out. And now, without any further ado, let's get on with the show. Tell us a little bit about your practice, how it's structured, and where it kind of fits into the spectrum of concierge medicine practices.
I have different terms for it now over the years. I've always liked to call it concierge light. And now the latest term that I've seen bandied about is blue collar concierge medicine. And one of my goals in designing the practice was to try and keep the extra out-of-pocket fees reasonable. I wasn't interested in having a concierge practice with an annual fee, $1,800 a year, $2,400 a year. I wasn't interested in one of the ones with even a much higher fee where, the doc might have only 50 patients and be able to accompany the patient to the visit with the cardiologist or an orthopedic surgeon. I wasn't interested in that type. I really wanted to make it available to everyone. So I designed it a little differently. What it comes down to in terms of being able to provide concierge type care is having a small enough patient panel. And you either do that by charging extra, which is where the concierge fee comes in, or minimizing expenses. And I tried to do both. I wasn't as successful initially in terms of the cutting the expenses. I went too big on space. I went too big on staff, including employing someone initially as a medical assistant / receptionist. And after 2 years, I let her go. And after my initial 7-year lease in too much space, I now sublease a single room that's 13.5 by 12 square feet. And so I have one desk, one computer, one exam table, et cetera, instead of all the redundancy that I had to have in a larger office. So I've tried to cut back on costs over time, and I've done that fairly successfully, but still not quite as much as I should have from the outset.
So how big is your patient panel now?
It's still not huge. It's somewhere north of 200 patients, which sounds like it's not nearly enough to be able to make enough of a living without having a higher annual fee. And that is the case. So I very much supplement what I do since I have few enough patients to be able to get by with most days actually being only in the office half a day. I supplement several ways. I do travel medicine consultations and immunizations. And I have that practice available to anybody. That has nothing to do with my concierge practice. So I do that, and that actually provides a fair number of patients. I did it on my own initially, and for the last several years, I've been associated with Travel Clinics of America, which is a national company that has travel medicine consultants in multiple cities. And so they expanded certainly the number of people that I've seen for that. The other thing that I do, you mentioned the UC San Diego PACE program, the Physician Assessment and Clinical Education Program. I still work with that program, and I work with them half-time. So that's basically a set salary and all that. And so that very much supplements my practice so that I can still practice the way I want to instead of the way other people have to, if that's a sort of easy way of putting it. And so that's basically how it works. I also have spent some time in the past working as a medical director for an eating disorders residential treatment center, and then I'm going to be doing that work for a company coming up soon, and so that'll be a supplement as well. So all these supplements allow me to practice the way I want to. If I had to rely solely on my practice for, everything salary-wise, I wouldn't quite be cutting it.
Yeah, so you've kind of built yourself a position in terms of your practice and some of the other things you're doing in addition to that. So walk us through what maybe a typical day or a typical week looks like for you. What are you generally up to?
Well, it varies. I am at the UC San Diego program several days a week or several half days a week. I always allow myself at least a half day in my practice. Rule of thumb that I learned way back when I was planning my practice is that on average, 1% of your patients need to see you every day. Well, 200, 250 patients, that's 2 to 2.5 patients a day. I can easily manage that and a travel patient or 2 or 3, but sometimes I have to see 3 or 4 of my own patients. It all depends. So my day is typically split between things. With the other work that I'll be doing, then that's another half day there. As long as it doesn't interfere with me being able to see anyone who needs to be seen on any given day or at least the next day, then I'm able to do all of that. And that's pretty much the case. I basically don't need to say, hey, you know what, I'm booked out. It's Wednesday. I can't see you the rest of this week. How about next week? And the other way I manage is also, for the most part, being in my office on Saturday mornings. And that allows me anything towards the end of the week. I can catch up with visits on Saturday morning if need be. And it's a nice service because Saturday mornings often are the only time people can come in without taking time off from work.
And when you started your current practice, were you transitioning or did you start from scratch?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I started from scratch, and that is not the way most concierge practices come into being. I'm glad you asked that because that's a real important point. Some people think I'm nuts for starting from scratch, but that's what I had to do because my practice, my too busy practice, which is generally the case for most transitions into concierge medicine, my too busy practice was a faculty practice. And so there was no way to convert that, although ironically enough, UC San Diego now has some concierge medicine practices. So I wish they'd thought about that when I was there. But yeah, so I started from scratch. I created it from scratch, had to get an electronic health record and all that. And some of my patients from my former practice came with me, not as many as I had hoped. And the first year built very quickly. And then after that, it's been, more steady, a steady but much slower growth rate.
From people I've talked to that have transitioned, or not transitioned, but started from scratch, and you alluded to this, kind of the major factors has been starting off as lean as possible and not getting a lot of office space and incurring a lot of overhead.
Well, and the mistake on my part was not doing that. And the rationale for not doing that was thinking, well, I'm going to call this a concierge medicine practice. And I'm maybe not going to charge as much as some other practices, but I darn well better act like one. So I have to have a really nice office with really nice reception room furniture. It's not a waiting room because no one waits, but I have to have really nice reception room furniture, and I have to have a full-fledged EMR, and I have to have staff. This, that, and the other thing. You know what? What patients want is your time and attention and availability. And so I'm providing that just fine in my one-room office. And so, yeah, the main lesson to take away starting from scratch is to go as lean as possible. And as you get busier and you're able to afford more, if you need more, then that's when you add.
Looking back now, is there anything else you would have done differently?
Let's see. I probably would have had someone else help me with my website, and I still need to work on it. And at the point of getting some assistance for that. So that and figuring out how to market, especially starting from scratch. If you're the doc who's got 2,000 patients, then you're going to, wean down to however many you need in a transition. You don't need to market much. You just need to make sure you retain enough of your patients. But starting from scratch, you got to grow. And primary care doctors are not used to advertising. And I'm still not comfortable with that concept. So, there are the docs who can go and show themselves at other offices and do speaking engagements in the community. If that's the way you are and you're comfortable doing that, more power to you. But
Well, what have you found to be the most effective way for you to bring new patients into your practice?
you know what? I can't tell you one particular thing. I have people who call me or email me, and I quite frankly don't know how they found me. I had one patient come in 2 weeks ago who is not one to go see a doctor very often, so much so that he thought that he had first read about me in an article in the main San Diego newspaper a couple of years ago. After he came in the first time, when he came back for the second visit, the follow-up visit, he informed me that he'd gone back and found the newspaper article, and in fact, it was one 5 years ago in the same paper. All that time, he had planned to see me whenever he was going to eventually need to see me, but it just took 5 years. But I have found that the articles like that, as much as, it might be a big article, it's hardly ever, aside from him and a few other people, it doesn't generate traffic. So I don't have any great growth or marketing ideas except, word of mouth is typically the best way to go if you can get it.
And when people refer you word of mouth, what is it they say? What is it that makes your practice unique that they want to tell their friends about?
That when they call, I answer the phone. When they need help at 8 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock at night or whatever, they call me on my cell phone. They can text me, they can email me. Things get done when they need to get done. They're not dealing with an associate. They're not dealing with anyone else. They're always just dealing with me. Some people really need that. And we'll see with the Affordable Health Care Act that we'll see if some people who have been seeing primary care doctors and using their insurance get squeezed out by those docs growing their practices even more with newly insured patients. And so maybe some people will start looking more for practices like we have, where you have to pay a little bit more, but at least you get the attention that you need and deserve.
Well, for physicians that want to move into a model similar to yours, what is the number one piece of advice you would give them? Or what's the number one piece of advice you wish you'd had 7 or 10 years ago when you changed over?
Take your time planning. Number one, this is going to be a series of things. Take your time planning. There's no rush. Talk to people who've done it. Look at different models. There are so many different financial models. So look at different models and get help. Now, where do you get help? When I was in the planning stages back in early 2005, I learned about, I guess it was originally the something or other American Association of Concierge Medicine, something like that. By the time I went to what was then their either second or third annual meeting in May of 2005, they were at that point changed to the Society for Innovative Medical Practice Design, SIMPD. That's a mouthful. They're now the AAPP, the American Academy of Private Physicians, and it's grown greatly. There are resources on the website, which is, I believe, aapp.org. So there are resources in terms of vendors. You can get your practice listed there. You can search multiple practices. I think the best way of learning about different models is to go to different practice websites and see how people do it differently. Because there, like I said already, there are lots and lots and lots of different models out there. So that's a really good resource. And then go to a meeting. And they have them, I think most recently they've been doing several a year. And they're a bit pricey, and some of it is a sell job, but also some of it is really useful information, legal aspects of things and everything else. So I think it's well worthwhile. And then another organization is Ideal Medical Practices, IMP for short, IMP. And I'm blanking on the website off the top of my head, but if you look at Ideal Medical Practices, this is a group of...
Yeah, we can link up to that in the show notes, so that's no problem. Go ahead.
Okay. This is a group of very innovative providers who, instead of focusing on the concierge model of extra fees, primarily focus on being lean in terms of the overhead. And so being able to provide similar type services without the extra fees. And so there are online resources for that group as well. And there's been annual meetings. It's been lovingly called IMP Camp. That's valuable. The group used to have a listserv, and there'd be 15, 20 messages a day, and often very, very useful information would be posted. And now it's done more in online, sort of more of a chat room style thing in terms of being able to get in on conversations. And I'm sorry, it's not a live chat room, but I'm blanking on the proper term for...
Like a forum style?
Yes, it's very much a forum style. Thank you. That's the proper term. So it's now forum style instead of a listserv.
Well, Dr. Schulman, thank you very much. Those were all the questions I had for you today. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
They can start with my website, which is martyschulmanmd.com, martyschulmanmd.com, or email martyschulmanmd@gmail.com.
All right, and we'll put a link to your site up on the website. So if y'all want to visit conciergemedicineradio.com, there'll be a link to Dr. Schulman's site where you can find him. So thank you again, Dr. Schulman. We appreciate you joining us today.
Certainly. All righty. Take care.
You can go to conciergemedicineradio.com to get this episode's notes and links to everything we've talked about, as well as the entire back catalog. For those of you working on bringing in new patients or retaining existing patients in your direct pay or concierge practices, we've also got a new report on the 5 keys to marketing for direct pay and concierge physicians. After asking physicians across the country about their biggest problem, I kept hearing the same thing come up. Patient education and marketing. How do we help patients understand what we do? So I put this report together after interviewing dozens of the most successful concierge and direct pay physicians across the country for the stories and tactics on how they've been able to generate dozens of word-of-mouth referrals each month, find more new patients through speaking opportunities, get featured in their local press, and use their website and online presence to educate their patients and grow their practice. So if you'd like to read their stories and see how to use them to help grow and retain more patients in your practice, you can download that on our site. Talk to you next Tuesday morning.
Thanks for joining us today at Concierge Medicine Radio. If you found today's show valuable, we'd love it if you spread the word by leaving us a review on iTunes or sharing it with your friends. To see notes on today's show, please visit us at conciergemedicineradio.com. While you're there, leave us your email to hear about all upcoming episodes.